This video is about building Stella Lee as strong as possible for as little money as possible. But before I get to that, if you just want the juice and no story time or context, then skip ahead to the deck overview. For most casual players or players either new to Stella or new to combo, I recommend you stay a while and listen. Whenever a new set comes out, I'll typically buy one of the new precons so that I can tinker with it. When Outlaws of Thunder Junction rolled around, the only commander that seemed interesting was Stella Lee, so naturally I bought the precon. Soon after that, though, I played against a number of my friends that bought it as well, and it was very underwhelming. It was slow, clunky, and seemed to be more of an Eris deck than a Stella one. The inspiration to tinker was low. Enter a friend that mostly plays cEDH, that had tinkered a lot. Now, my playgroup doesn't play much cEDH, and I haven't played much combo for a very long time. In fact, I think the last combo deck I played was a Goblin Charbelcher deck when Mirrodin block was standard. Yes, I'm old, but I digress. So, out of character, we sat down and played a high powered game with a friend that we don't play with that often and was piloting a stellar cEDH build. Needless to say, the precon and his deck were two very different decks, both in power level as well as the cost, given most cEDH decks cost well into the thousands of dollars. Very short game later, and the inspiration to tinker with Stella was high. I sat down with my precon and started looking at upgrades. Disappointingly, most of the tweaks keeping the same theme of the deck seemed really lackluster. So I thought to myself, I wonder how cheap I can make a functioning copy of the cEDH build. The result? Well, you know that already from the title of this video. You can get a version of Stella Lee that slaps for about $100. Let's take a step back and look at Stella herself. She's all about chaining multiple spells together in a turn, which in turn give you some impulse draw value and a way to copy your spells. What you do with that copying ability is entirely up to you, but I find the combo approach to be much more appealing. The value driven approach, which is the route that the precon goes, seems to struggle to close out games and end up dirtling far too often. Speaking of the precon, I want to address where both the precon build and the average deck list on EDH Rec go a little bit wrong. Firstly, this is a spellslinger deck, but it comes with 20 creatures. That's way too much. Now, this could be because it looks like this deck is really supposed to be about creating lots of tokens and winning via combat damage. But there are so many more interesting and fun decks that one can build if one just wants to turn creatures sideways. Then, looking at the spells in the deck, it quickly becomes apparent that it's going to be very difficult to chain much of anything together when the average mana value of your spells is over 3. If you bought the Stellar Precon, like it, and want to make minor changes to your precon, I suggest you make Eris the commander and pursue that strategy 100%. If, however, you want an actual stellar pew pew spellslinger deck that's both powerful and fun, you're in the right place. In pursuing this pew pew version, don't pay much attention to EDH Rec, as it'll lead you astray. The average deck there is clearly a mashup between two polarizing strategies, those that spend more money on the precon and those that are abandoning the precon entirely and building high power cEDH versions. Other than the fact that the average deck comes with a $600 price tag, the contrast between the precon led strategies and the introduction of the high powered combo pieces is going to confuse a lot of players. So, let's talk about my version of Stella. High power on a budget. Our deck is a combo deck. It's a sniper rifle, not a shotgun. Our game plan is all about getting Stella in play and then playing enough spells to allow her to copy spells. After that, we win the game with one of our combo pieces. The rest of the deck, be it card draw, counter magic, protection, or tutors, exists solely to enable that line. So let's walk through the deck list. After that, I'll talk through the combo and the various lines in detail, as you really need to understand them to be able to play the deck at all. Our mana base is pretty simple. We run a lot of basics and run cheaper dual lands to keep costs low. Typically, we don't have any mana issues. The same is true of our mana rocks. Unlike the higher powered cEDH decks, we don't get to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on mana acceleration. We've got to make do with cheaper but reliable mana rocks. Because of this, both treasures and to a degree rituals play a huge part in our strategy. Seize the spoils, pirates pillage, big score, and unexpected windfall are especially important, as they both create ramp and help us dig through our deck to find our combo pieces. Our rituals in Rite of Flame, Desperate Ritual, and Simian Spirit Guide can be used to accelerate us into wins more quickly, but for me, more often than not, they exist to cast Twisted Fealty for free once we've drawn our entire deck. Card draw is critically important for our deck, helping us to dig through and find our win conditions as quickly as possible. We have a bunch of Thrill of Possibility style cards, and a special shout out to Bitter Reunion that can help us give our commander haste if we don't have any of our other haste enablers. Then, we have our 1 mana blue card draw spells that exist to either help us dig through our deck in the early game, or once we're close to our combo, can be a cheap enabler to help us get to our commander's copy ability. Our 1 mana haste enablers in this deck are critical to our win condition. Playing our commander and a haste enabler directly followed by one of our other win conditions can seal the game. Our removal package is pretty streamlined, and that's because we typically only have to survive maybe 1 or 2 threats to be able to get to the point where we can combo out. The removal we do have is focused on removing almost any pesky non-land permanent that we might encounter, and potentially helping us dig through our deck as a bonus. As a combo deck, we should be expecting that there will be interaction and people trying to mess with us when we try and win the game. As such, we have a 2-part section that's devoted to helping us force through our combo. The first is cheap counter magic, primarily aimed at targeting instants, because we will win the game at sorcery speed on our turn. Cards like Dispel and Miscast really shine in this deck. Secondly, we have cards that protect our commander by giving her hexproof if someone were to try and target her with a removal spell as we start our combo. Like most combo decks, we'll take as many tutors as we can get. Whilst our pool of tutors is small, it's pretty effective at getting us the cards we need when we need them, or alternatively getting one of the other tutors to get us the card that we need if we don't have the right sort of tutor in hand. And special shout out to Muddle the Mixture, that rarely exists as a counterspell on the deck, but can help us fetch a Merchant Scroll, or perhaps even a Refocus, to help us win the game. Last, but definitely not least, let's talk about our win conditions. First and foremost, we obviously have to have Stella. Next up, we have literally our only win condition in the deck, Twisted Fealty. Then, we have 4 cards that perform the same function. Cerulean Wisps is obviously the best, but the others can do the same job. Whilst not strictly a win condition, Mission Briefing helps us bring back Twisted Fealty if by some miracle it finds its way into the graveyard before we try and combo out. Let's talk about how to play the deck, starting with the combo. For my fellow Precon enjoyers, I'm going to go through the combo in quite a bit of detail to make sure you understand exactly how it works. The first step is casting Twisted Fealty and targeting Stella Lee. This leaves us with an untapped Stella Lee and a copy of Twisted Fealty on the stack. Next, we tap Stella and target Twisted Fealty, leaving us with 2 copies of Twisted Fealty on the stack. Assuming your opponents haven't tried to intervene, we will now resolve the first copy of Twisted Fealty. This will both untap Stella and create a wicked roll that we can then attach to her. Now that she's untapped, we're going to tap her again and target Twisted Fealty, adding yet another copy onto the stack. By this point, you should start seeing our loop, as we'll now go to resolve that copy of Twisted Fealty. When we do, we'll both untap Stella and create another wicked roll. And when we do that, the existing wicked roll will fall off and make each opponent lose 1 life. It's at this point that even the most stalwart of stubborn opponents should submit to your combo prowess. But if not, you can play it out by repeating the combo forever and draining them of 1 health until they submit. Now that you know how the combo works, let's talk about the different lines or routes we can take to get there. The first step will always be to play Stella Lee. Occasionally, you might draw multiple sources of protection and no haste enablers. If you do that, you might decide to play Stella and try and protect her until the next turn when you can activate her, but 90% of the time, you'll follow up your commander with a haste enabler. Depending on the cards you have in hand, your next play will either be to play Twisted Fealty and attempt to win the game, or to play Cerulean Wisps, draw your entire deck, and then attempt to win the game. In either case, I would strongly recommend not trying to combo out if you don't have counter magic or at the very least protection in hand. Now that you know both of our main combo lines, let's look at them in a little bit more detail. First, we have the direct line that plays straight into Twisted Fealty. If we attempt this line in one turn, including counter magic, it requires us to have up 8 mana, which is quite a lot. This is the more expensive of the two lines, and therefore is my least favorite. Instead, I prefer the line that focuses on Cerulean Wisps, where we draw our entire deck. This, being the cheaper of the two lines, only requires 6 mana to cast all of the cards in one turn, making it significantly easier to pull off. Now, you might be questioning, okay, great, we draw our entire deck, but how do we win the game? This is where our friends Simian Spirit Guide, Rites of Flame, and Desperate Ritual come into play. They'll generate 3 mana for us for free that we can then use to cast Twisted Fealty and win the game. To maximize our chance of comboing out, even if we can't find Cerulean Wisps, the deck can also combo with Refocus or Twitch. Both cards will achieve the same goal, albeit for a bit more mana. With the high grade combo lesson out of the way, let's look at how we play our first few turns to get to that point. Whilst the best case scenario for us is to have combo pieces in our opening hand, typically I think it's more important to make sure we have enough mana and sufficient sources of card draw. This means, ideally, my opening hand will have around 3 lands, a source of ramp, and a source of card draw, with the remaining 2 slots being flexible. When piloting the deck, don't be too afraid to fully commit yourself in the early game. I find holding up mana or worrying too much about taking damage isn't worth it. Instead, focus all your attention on digging as fast as you can to get to the cards you need, because it means you're probably going to win the game before your opponents can kill you anyway. That's because this deck will reliably win on about turn 5 to 6, and sometimes even sooner. Given this deck was inspired by a cEDH list, the upgrade potential is obviously quite high. That said, I think this build is in a really good spot, and if I was personally to upgrade it, there's only a few cards that I would consider adding. The majority of these are going to be free spells, especially free counter magic. Spellseeker and Jessica's Will are both cards that I really didn't want to cut, but that I kind of had to get it close to $100. They would definitely be candidates for bringing back into the deck. And lastly, if you want to get some more speed, Dockside Extortionist and Mox Amber could both be added, but personally I won't be adding them. In the process of building this deck, I think I've managed to build one of the strongest decks out of my entire collection. And it's also ironically one of the cheapest. Given how easy it is to spend hundreds or even thousands of dollars on cards that we think we need to complete our decks, I think finding alternative strategies and alternative cards that cost a lot less money is really cool. If you enjoyed this video, toss a like to your deck builder. And if you plan to build this deck, I hope you enjoy this very base take at Stella Lee.